Welcome to Coffee with Coker, a healthcare business podcast from the Coker Group that focuses on solutions to help healthcare organizations effectively navigate the changing healthcare industry landscape. My name is Mark Reibolt, and I'm the host of the podcast. And today we're joined by a new member of the Coker team, Christopher Kunney. He's a senior vice president in our healthcare technology consulting group. And Christopher is a really exciting addition to the team. So one of the things we wanted to do today was just introduce Christopher and talk a little bit about his background, which we do briefly. But what we really wanted to do is, since as we recorded this, it was right after the annual HIMSS meeting, and that is a big conference every year that a lot of activity and developments related to healthcare technology stem from that conference every year down in Orlando. And so Christopher was there. Christopher's gone for many years and is very active with HIMSS. And so we wanted to get Christopher just to talk for a few minutes about some of the key things that came out of the conference this year, some of the key takeaways. So that's what Christopher does. Some of the things we talked about include a discussion at HIMSS around interoperability, data transparency, cybersecurity, and telehealth. And we also talked about some of the kind of newer things that he saw coming out that HIMSS and speakers and attendees highlighted more this year. And that included things like AI and the role AI is playing or continuing to grow in terms of its role in healthcare technology. We talked about physician burnout, and that's something that we've actually, as far as Coker's work goes, we've been doing more of that, and there's a technology component to that discussion. And I thought it was interesting that Christopher mentioned physician burnout was actually a pretty big topic at the conference this year. And then we also talked about some of the news, particularly in 2018, that we saw and developments coming out of the likes of Amazon and JP Morgan and Warren Buffett, and some of the things that these companies and individuals have been talking about as far as getting into healthcare technology or doing more in the realm of health IT. And so I think that we're going to continue to see that kind of come to the center a little bit more, it sounds like. At least that was kind of what we talked about a little bit with Christopher. I think it was, it sounds like, as usual, there were a lot of interesting and exciting things. And I think probably all of these different points we will follow up with more discussion, as we already have on things like cybersecurity. But stay tuned for more discussion on these in future podcast episodes. As always, we thank you for listening. We also encourage you to follow us. You can follow us on social media. You can follow us and subscribe to the podcast on all of the podcast platforms out there that are available. You can also find this episode along with all of our episodes at coffeewithcoker.com. So you can find all of our episodes, all the things we've been talking about, and we always welcome feedback and submissions as far as requests for future topics or questions on past discussions that we've had. So again, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy this episode. All right, well, welcome back for another episode, and this is exciting episode, something we've been looking forward to because we have a good, quick discussion. But one of the first things we want to do is introduce a new Coker team member, a senior vice president here at Coker. Christopher Kunney is a veteran of the healthcare technology world. So we're really excited to have him as the SVP in our technology consulting group. So first of all, welcome, Christopher.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be a part of the Coker family, and I'm looking forward to working with our current customers as well as future customers that we bring to the organization and with the entire Coker team.
Yeah. Well, we're, like I said, really excited to have you, and we're going to talk about something. So as we're recording this, we're about a week or so post the HIMSS annual meeting.
Exactly.
And then one of the things we're going to talk about here is some of the things that you were at HIMSS. You've attended HIMSS for many years, so having been in the industry. And so I thought it'd be good and helpful helpful for our listeners to just talk about some of the key takeaways that you saw from HIMSS. But before you do that, maybe just give the quick kind of your background so our listeners kind of know you and some of the things where you come from and some of the skills and knowledge base you bring to the team.
Well, I've spent 30 plus years in the IT industry. A little over half of that really focused around the healthcare information technology vertical. I've played a number of different roles in this space. Early in my career, I was actually a software developer working for a small company that developed software technology for the healthcare industry. And then over the course of my career, I've taken on a number of different roles, including serving as a chief information officer for a large healthcare system here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And then most recently, over the past 7 or 8 years now, I've really been on the consulting and strategy side of the business, where I work with providers, technology companies, academic institutions, government agencies, and helping to identify and develop strategies around their healthcare and technology investments, as well as helping them lead their organizations through these transformation activities as well, too. And so it's really been a very interesting journey for me, having, again, been on the operation side and leading organizations, and now here on the advisory side and offering my insights and perspective on how to take advantage of technology in the healthcare space.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've really enjoyed getting as we've talked and gotten to know each other since you joined the team is, having that perspective of both the kind of advisor to healthcare organizations and healthcare technology entities and that whole community. But you've also been in the shoes of many of our clients as a CIO from a health system. So you really have a good perspective that's extremely valuable, in my opinion, for our clients, that you've been in their shoes. You've looked at kind of all the things they're dealing with and addressed or had to resolve or deal with a lot of the challenges that they deal with.
That's right. Having, taken the arrows in the back in many cases and learning from that, as well as the successes and working with other healthcare leaders. I think I bring a really interesting perspective to our clients. Again, understanding their challenges and what motivates them to want to invest in these technologies, and sometimes their fear and apprehension around these investments as well too. Reassuring them and helping them understand how to navigate the pitfalls associated with this, I think, is a unique skill and experience I bring to the table. Also, I'm somewhat of an evangelist as well, too, in the space, in that, many organizations, again, in some cases are a little apprehensive about adopting these technologies and wanting to understand how to best apply them. And so I like to bring thought leadership to my clients as well, too, educating them, because I think an informed consumer makes the best decision.
Yeah.
And empowers them to make the right decisions for their organizations as well. And so I'm very much a proponent of understanding these technologies, demystifying the technologies to the senior leadership, and then empowering the senior leadership to make the right decisions for their organizations to meet whatever their strategic and clinical objectives might be.
Yeah, well, I think that's well said, and certainly, again, extremely excited for what you're bringing to the team and our clients.
Very excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, so that's a great segue, I guess, and let's talk about HIMSS.
Sure.
So maybe just dive in. What are some of the key takeaways you thought were interesting?
HIMSS is always an interesting conference. It can be very enlightening and very energizing, and in some cases be very overwhelming. It's kind of a double-edged sword. There's so much going on in the industry that, I equate it to kind of like going to this Smithsonian Institute. You just can't go for one day and get an appreciation of what's there to offer, to be offered to you. And so, it's a week long and beyond, activity that many healthcare professionals take full advantage of. And I try to do that as well, and have been for over a decade or more. But like many of the other past conferences, this one continues to offer new, interesting, and innovative, perspectives on the challenges of how to enhance and deliver better quality of care in a cost-effective way. So no different in terms of the overall mission, but the things that we are focused on as an industry continue to morph and change and develop. I think a few things that really stood out for me with this year's conference was some of the federal mandates that are now working their way through our legislative cycle that help the industry start to be held more accountable for sharing data amongst themselves. HHS just recently dropped this long-awaited information technology blocking rule, which really is now encouraging providers and tech companies to make this data available seamlessly to other providers and to patients, and to do that in a very cost-effective way. And then holding us accountable for what has traditionally been a perspective some organizations have taken around blocking or limiting the amount of data that could be made available. And so technology in and of itself isn't limiting. I mean, information is information, and zeros and ones, bits and bytes. It can be shared, in a multitude of ways. We just, as an industry, have to make a conscious decision that there's a real value proposition for everyone to be able to make this data available in kind of an open market format, and leverage it in ways that allows, again, patients to make better decisions about their care, clinicians to have more information available to them so that they can make better decisions, and then organizations as a whole to have access to data so that they can make better business decisions around how we deliver care as well too. And I think with HHS's recent announcement, this continues to move us down that path of true interoperability.
Yeah, good point.
In addition to that, the technologies that support that ability for interoperability and security, technologies like FHIR that continue to become a fixed standard in the industry. There were examples throughout the conference of how that's being applied and leveraged, both through technology companies and in the clinical setting, which was very exciting. And more importantly, I sat in on a seminar that really talked about making this data available to patients, and then really empowering patients more to have access to this data, and making patients more accountable for the quality of the data that comes through as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the term interoperability is something that's been thrown around for well over 10 years, longer than that, I'm sure. But, that's been kind of a continuous thing. But I think it is kind of nice to see some substantive movement on that, whether it's coming from HHS or coming from the industry, the vendors, whatever that may be. At least we're starting to see some substance emerge out of that.
That's right. And really, seeing it kind of being sandwiched in that the federal government is holding us accountable for knocking down the walls around interoperability. The providers and patients are demanding more of that as well too, and somewhere meeting in the middle with the technologies that we need to start to continue to invest and adopt that will enable us to make that a reality. And it's exciting to see that there's still a tremendous amount of energy and interest to make that happen.
That's great.
Again, privacy and security continues to be on the forefront of healthcare organizations kind of top 10 list of priorities. And so technologies like blockchain are continuing to emerge as best of breed solutions in this space, which many prognosticators predicted would take several years for us to start adopting these technologies. Where it's very clear at the HIMSS conference, there's a lot of energy and a lot of effort being placed on that platform, and real world examples that are now coming out to show that there's true applications for it, and so the viability of it is a lot more tangible today than many may have thought. So it's very exciting to see that happen.
I'll just kind of throw in a quick plug. We actually recently did another podcast specifically talking about cybersecurity, and Marissa Maldonado joined me for that, and on our team there. And she went through some of those kind of new policy changes, some of the things to look out for. So anyway, I would refer our listeners over to that if they want more information on that. But it does seem to be a growing, escalating theme or priority.
Absolutely. Another interesting area, as we talk about again, meeting this lofty goal of interoperability and having access to data, then it once we have access to data, which I like to use the term currency, data is really the currency in the system. How do we maximize that? How do we, take all of this information, the terms in the past were big data, and then there are other terms like called deep data. I mean, you can have all this information available to you, but if it doesn't have real value for you, it's just a bunch of zeros and ones.
Sure.
And so technologies like machine learning and AI were topics of discussion at the conference as well, and how we use those types of emerging technologies to assimilate and aggregate this information in a way that produces really actionable results for clinicians and healthcare leaders to make better decisions around how we deliver care, what our investments should be in this space, and we as consumers, how we better manage our personal care and the care of our loved ones. And so it was exciting to see some emerging technologies that are being built on AI, machine learning platforms to be showcased at the conference. That's very interesting. I think another interesting thing that was on the topic of many folks in many folks' discussions was physician burnout. We have started to recognize that with this new information age that's happening in healthcare, we're starting to recognize that it is taxing quite a bit and impacting our clinicians, and in some cases in a very positive way, as we mentioned, getting you access to information that helps you make better clinical decisions. But how we, collect that information and manage that information in a clinical environment, in some cases, has been very frustrating for clinicians, for physicians. Back in the day, a physician could walk into an exam room and have a face-to-face conversation with a patient and interact with them. Now they're trying to balance that along with entering in information into technology, into tools that will allow them to, again, manage the patient in an electronic way, but do that also and still maintain this personal relationship with them. And that can be very frustrating for them, as well as it for those who are not digital natives, who did not necessarily grow up with technology, from cradle to grave. This is a very new environment for them. They're not used to having to type on keyboards and, move mice around and click and point and click. And unfortunately, we're still in the very first and second generations of many of these technologies. And so they're not quite as intuitive as some of the platforms like Facebook or Twitter or some of the social media platforms where you just get on those and you figure it out yourself, and they're pretty intuitive.
Sure.
Where our electronic health record systems and clinical information systems, unfortunately, still have a ways to go to have that intuitive nature about them. So that has a direct correlation and impact on physician satisfaction.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of discussions around how do we find ways to design these tools in a more smarter way, or to use AI or machine learning to capture information that's being discussed, and it in and of itself, the technology in and of itself, passively entering that information into technologies that the clinician can use, and so the clinician can go back to what they were normally doing, which is focusing on the patient and not focusing in on the technology.
Yeah. I think something interesting on that, we've been tracking and doing a little bit of stuff around physician burnout recently, because we've seen this pop up more so. And, I think for our hospitals out there and medical practices out there, we're seeing the need for the C-suite to bring the CIO out of the kind of background and start to really engage. It's an opportunity to positively engage their physicians and even from the patient standpoint, the patient experience.
That's right.
And it's not just about, it doesn't have to be a torturous process. This is something that, hey, this is about clinical efficiency, clinical improvement, clinical quality.
That's right.
Patient satisfaction, like you said, physician satisfaction. And those things go a long way to making a hospital or group work.
Exactly. And I think when you do postmortems on some of these implementations that don't go quite as well as expected, or you don't get as much clinician adoption, in many cases, what you see is that these projects were initially driven as technology projects versus clinical transformation, business transformation efforts that really should be led by the the individuals and stakeholders who ultimately are going to be leveraging the technology. I think one of the big mistakes that happens a lot of times is we look at these, again, as IT projects, and we look at the CIO and their staff to be the ones that are going to orchestrate change in an organization. Well, they help to enable the change by implementing the technologies in a way that hopefully make it more efficient and easier for you to get access to information. But we also have to make sure that we're engaging the stakeholders and users of the technology to be a part of that process. They need to help to define how the technologies are going to be used, how the training is going to be delivered, how the ongoing governance and support of that technology will be managed through its life cycle. And we also have to recognize, just like any, and I now use the term that IT is a utility, like any utility, it requires care and feeding and ongoing investment as well too. And that's a more holistic approach that we have found that enables you to be much more successful in the adoption of these technologies when you drive it from those perspectives versus saying this is an IT project. Because as soon as you position it that way, then you get, the naysayers and the folks who aren't digital natives become very uncomfortable with the fact that IT's not now trying to tell me how to do my job.
That's right.
Versus IT enabling my ability to do a better job.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
I think the other thing that, a couple of other things that really came out of that, the conference that was really exciting and interesting. Again, this concept of using the Internet of Things, the cloud computing technologies that are now starting to become more adopted and more acceptable within healthcare. Just 5 or 6 years ago, you talked about moving clinical data to the cloud, and organizations were extremely fearful, skeptical of your ability to do that and secure it appropriately, and then maintain control of that information. You're starting to see more and more of these technologies being leveraged in the cloud-based solution, which allows the organization to scale a lot more effectively, gain access to a multitude of resources and data points through the cloud-based platform, and then engage patients in a more effective way through passive technologies like telemedicine, monitoring tools, and analytics tools that can be laid on top of that so that they make better decisions as well. So you saw a lot of that happening at the conference as well. And then I think overall, just this recommitting ourselves to what the real purpose of HIMSS is all about. And that is really to, again, leverage technology to drive the improvement in the quality. And, continuing to cite those success stories and opportunities where we've seen that happen, but also continue to challenge ourselves that, we're very much on a journey that doesn't necessarily have a final destination. We're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing, and we have to be receptive to this evolution of leveraging information in the way that we're doing it now that helps us provide, a better quality of care to our patients, or to our communities. And so, meeting all the professionals there, it's kind of like going to a family reunion every year. You run into all your compadres and folks who are dealing with similar challenges. You have a chance to interact and build thought and share thought leadership, but also, re-energize yourself as you come back into the real world, start to work within your clinical care communities, and we as strategists and consultants offering more innovative ways of helping them solve the problem. And so I came away from that with a lot of nuggets that I'm now hoping to bring back and implement with our clients.
Well, we're definitely going to be talking about a lot of these, and even already are, developing some information and thought leadership around really all of these topics. And because, like you said, these are things that are continuing to evolve and develop and change, and I think you would agree we could probably spend an hour talking about all of these things. Things like telehealth, for instance. I mean, I know that's on the minds of a lot of people, perhaps everyone in the industry. But exactly what that means and how that it will ultimately manifest for a CIO or a hospital C-suite, a medical group, a patient, a physician. There's a lot there to unpack. So I know we'll be revisit that.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'm excited about in the conversations we're having internally here at CwC is how do we drive that from a holistic perspective, not just purely look at the technology, but understand what's the business case for implementing telehealth.
Right.
What's the real, clinical and financial advantage to the practice for doing that?
Right.
Where are the gaps in the technologies that exist in that practice or that healthcare organization today that we can help to remediate? What are the revenue cycle opportunities that are driven through the use of telehealth? And then ultimately on the back end, where are the business intelligence and clinical informatics value that we get out of the information that we're collecting through this platform? And then ultimately, how does it really drive better quality of care to the communities and to the constituents that we serve? We want to approach it really from that perspective and not just, say, okay, you're going to implement a telemedicine program for telemedicine's sake. It really has to have a real intrinsic value to the organization. And we want to bring solutions and insight from that perspective.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. Well, this has been extremely helpful. Before we close out, one thing I was curious about, last year or in 2018, there was a lot of buzz around, particularly like the mainstream media, even beyond the healthcare industry, about this, this potential collaboration or consortium. You got Amazon and Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, you got JP Morgan. I mean, this kind of idea that they're doing something with healthcare and healthcare technology and healthcare information. But I think it's been a lot of headlines, but I don't know that we've seen no one really knows what are they doing? What are they trying to do? Was there any discussion of that?
Yeah, they were well represented at the conference. Absolutely. And set up a number of different business cases around how they wanted to approach healthcare. And I think, again, when you look at some of the platforms that organizations like that have implemented as it relates to supply chain management, as it relates to social media and the sharing of information, they're bringing those very innovative and disruptive, technologies to healthcare and applying them in a way that helps us, again, increase the workflow for patient care or improve the workflow for patient care, make better business decisions and clinical decisions by using things like AI and machine learning platforms, making these products, again, more intuitive and easier for clinicians to use because they've implemented technologies like, Facebook and other social media platforms and looking at healthcare from that perspective as well, too. Or technologies like Alexa and others where they can use that voice to text type of recognition to make, again, it a lot more seamless for the clinician to interact with the patient without having to let the technology be as intrusive. So you saw things like that are emerging, and that's what's exciting about the industry as well. And I do believe in order for the industry to innovate and to become more disruptive, it will take companies like that to come in and introduce, this different way of looking at, healthcare and applying these very interesting approaches to it.
Yeah, well, that is interesting, and it's encouraging to hear that. Yeah, there's something driving here.
Exactly.
There's something coming down the pipe, hopefully. So we'll look forward to getting more of that. But yeah, so this has been extremely helpful. I appreciate you doing this. Again, we're excited to have you here, and we look forward to tackling some of these other issues and more in the future.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be a part of the CwC family, and I'm looking forward to continuing this dialogue, maybe in future podcasts as well, and maybe delving deeper into some of these other areas, but more importantly, really serving our clients.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Coffee with CwC, and we thank you for listening. We want to encourage all of our listeners to participate and contribute in the podcast. So if you have any questions on any of the things we discussed in this episode, any of the topics that were presented, please feel free to ask us. Also, we welcome your feedback and suggestions. If you have any ideas related to the material we discussed in this episode, or in any episode, please let us know and we'll make sure to incorporate it. And if you have ideas for topics you'd like to hear more information about in future episodes, please send those suggestions to us. We would love to hear them, and we'd love to incorporate them into our future episodes. You can find us online and on social media. Start with Our website, and specifically the podcast, is coffeewithcoker.com. You can also find that through the main Coker website at cokergroup.com. You can also find us on social media, Twitter at Coker Group, and then on LinkedIn, you can search for Coker Group and find our page and the page for some of our team members as well there. So you can find us and reach out to us a number of places. And then if you want to contact us directly, one of the best ways to do that, email feedback@cokergroup.com. That's feedback@cokergroup.com. And again, we'd love to get your feedback. And we'd love to encourage everyone to subscribe to the podcast so that you can be notified when future episodes are released. We look forward to the next episode, and we look forward to getting your suggestions and feedback on this episode. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to speaking with you again on future episodes.